Hello everybody and welcome back. In this segment video I'm going to show you how to transition between sizes, lengthen and shorten, and of course I'm going to talk about the full bust adjustment. So obviously you have decided what size you need to cut, how much to lengthen or shorten based on measurements that you have taken. And I am going to go back to the sizing that I had chosen for my mannequin, which is a size 14 for the bust and a size 10 for the waist. All you need to do is make a little tick. This is 10, 12, 14 right here where the pattern starts to straighten out. Make a little tick down here at the size 10 at the waist. And then you're ready to make a straight line between those two, transitioning from this 14 into the size 10. Now, if you want a really exact fit, you can do that by using these increments. This chart is also available on my website. So say your measurement is 26 inches and you don't really want to go all the way up to the size 12 and risk that. You need to add 1 inch more. Then we need to increase this by 1/4 of an inch, which is going to be slightly less than the size 12 line. And this technique is especially useful if you are cutting a size that is outside of the grade. So say you're a size 18 on the bust and you need to transition to add in a little bit more at the side seam here. Say you need to add 2 inches more for the 18, then you would just take that 1/2 inch, which is 2 inches divided by 4, make a line out here, and then transition from the bust up here out to this line over here. And then that would be adding the additional that you need. Now before I draw my line, I'm going to do I'm going to show you how to really quickly shorten and lengthen your patterns. Now first let me explain that I always trace off my size. If you leave your original pattern as it is, then if you make a mistake you can always come back and retrace your steps and correct yourself in the next round, in the next go around. And if you don't have your original anymore, then you're sort of stuck with it. So I've already drawn in 2 lines here. They are parallel to each other and perpendicular to the grain line or to the center front. Always, 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 when you lengthen or shorten, it should be perpendicular to the grain line. So I'm going to fold one up to match the other, and if I was going to keep it this way, then of course I would use my tape and tape that down. And then I'm ready to take my ruler and make this transition line from this little dot down to the size 10 dot. Now and then I would trace it off and I'm ready to go. Now if I want to lengthen, I'm going to do the exact opposite, or exactly the same thing, but with the paper that I'm going to be tracing with. So this is in essence my grain line. I've got 2 parallel lines here, 1 inch apart from each other because I want to lengthen 1 inch. Fold those up to match, and then I'm ready to trace. I would trace down to this line here, leave this space open, trace along here, and then when I open this pattern up, voila, I've got my length, and I can take my 2 dots that I've drawn and just draw a straight line between them. Don't forget your notches when you're tracing off your pattern. So in talking about the grade, I want you to, it's good to note that down here at the bottom, there is no grade. This is what we call 0, 0, meaning it doesn't grow. So whichever size you decide to transition to, it's nothing, it's 0. So if I'm transitioning from the 12 or the 14 out to the 18, I would use my 18 line and bring it right over here to nothing. And the same with my 10, transition to the 10 and use the 10 line all the way down here, because no growth happens here. It happens all the way up here at the top. So the other thing that I would like to mention is that I am not going to make my alteration to all 3 pieces. I'm going to use my bodice right front and then cut it for all the different pieces that I need. Let me show you my pattern piece. I have marked it. This is my center front. I will just fold it along this line, and then I will cut 1 interlining and 1 lining. I've got those notes made here, and I've also made a note for myself up here. Bodice front A, B, C center front notes, cut 1 of each. And then when I cut out my right and left front, I'm going to go ahead and cut all the way out here, and then when I've got my pattern pieces turned right side out, I will flip this one over to the left piece and cut it right along that pink line where my left front is supposed to end. And then I've got my 2 pieces and both my lining and my inner lining that will be cut on center front. So now we're ready to talk about the full bust adjustment. So here we are. I'm ready to do my full bust adjustment. I have my inset lining for either A or B. Now I'm going to demonstrate on the B. The A is going to be exactly the same. The only thing I would like to remind you is that you need to lengthen or shorten your inset center piece. So the first thing we want to do is review the bust adjustment guide. If you are in A cup, you will definitely need to do a small cup adjustment. B, the fit will be okay. A C, the fit will be even better, I think. And so I'm going to show you how to do a full cup adjustment on the D cup, which is actually adding only 3/4 of an inch on one side per side. So if you double that, we're only adding 1.5 inches, not the 2 inches more. And I think, especially for this pattern, that's going to be sufficient. So rather than mess with my original pattern, I went ahead and made a photocopy of this pattern. Most of us have like a 3-in-1, and I just cut off the center front to make it easy to deal with. I've also added my alteration lines. This one is going to be my width line. This is going to be my lengthen line, or shorten, depending on whether you're lengthening or shortening your pattern. Let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to cut into my pattern right along my lengthen line, right over to my bust point there, or to my dart tip. And I'm going to just go ahead and separate that pattern piece. And then this one is going to be cut right up to this circle, but not through it. You'll notice that I've also drawn in my seam line so that I can stay within that allowance. And then I'm going to cut from this side into the allowance so that I've made like a little tiny paper hinge. I can add or subtract or whatever. So if I need to subtract for a small bust adjustment and I want to take away 1/4 inch, which, you know, you could maybe for your particular shape, a little bit more would be better, then I'm going to overlap this and tape it into place. I'm going to use push pins. And then this one up here will be reduced depending on where they meet. So I'm going to draw in my 1/4 line, and then I want to make sure that my pattern meets each other at that point. So yes, 1/4 inch seems to be good. and then tape those in place. And then my dart tip remains out here, but my dart only goes this much. So my dart is this much width, not this much width. So close that dart up, true it, and draw your new line, which will look, I gotta get that out of the way, which will look something like this. Because remember, the seam allowance doesn't count, and this is my seam allowance. So I need to close that up, and this is my seam allowance, and then this becomes my dart reshaped to match my dart tip here. There, like this. There's my new dart. I've closed this up. That's a small bust adjustment. Okay, so let me show you how to do a full bust adjustment now. Adding 3/4 of an inch in width, and I've experimented a little bit on length to see how much I need to add, and have discovered that it's a 1/2 inch. So all I did was pull this out and then add as much as would help me connect these two for a nice transition and give me enough length to make those pieces fall together. So you'll remember that with a lengthen, I've got my line here, my plumb line, which is also my center front or my grain line, or in this case it is also my grain line. And then I'm going to tape this in place along the top line. And then this gets taped in place along the bottom line. And I'm matching up my center front, and I'm centering on the green line. So mine is thick. I would normally use a very narrow pen so that my line isn't so thick. And now I want to add 3/4 of an inch from this point here, because that's where my dart tip was. 3/4 of an inch here puts me out to here. So I'm going to hinge this and bring it in to match or to meet that mark. And there I am. I've added 3/4 of an inch and a 1/2 inch here. And now I need to draw in a new dart. And I'm going to pick a location that is in the middle between these 2 points. Now, the bigger the dart is, the closer the bust tip it should be. And in this particular case, it should be right on the bust point. So if you want to hold that up to yourself at center front and kind of gauge, maybe your bust point needs to be over here, maybe your bust point is over here a little bit. It sort of depends on the width of the breast. But if I don't know, then I'm going to pick a location that's in the center, that's sort of sharing the difference. And then I'm going to draw a new dart line that matches up to this point here, this point here. And this becomes my new dart space. All right, so I'm not done yet though. I also need to true this. Let me take this side down. By closing that dart. So I'm going to fold it right along this bottom edge. Actually, I should fold it along the top edge because the dart is going to go up, not down. fold it along the top edge. Like that. Bring it to meet. I hope you can see that. Bring it to meet the second line for the new dart point. And you can see that there's a little bit of a jog right here. So that needs to be trued. Right there, I've drawn in a new line. Let me draw it in a different color so it's nice and thick and heavy and you can see it. So now I've drawn in my new line, and to find out how much dart I've got, I'm going to go ahead and cut, because I need to trim this anyway. Trim all the way around the rest of this. Be sure and leave your black line though, because we need to go and make a photocopy of this, or you can trace it off if you're going to be tracing, because we need to create a left side, and we're going to have several more pieces that we need to make from this pattern piece. So here's my original. I've copied off two more times. These are going to become the right and left interlining. Now I've trimmed these off, and I've marked on the other side, on the opposite side, what the dart is. I'll just match these up at center front and tape those in place. The idea is that I want two pattern pieces. From this, I want to make two pattern pieces that look like this. My right and left inset interlining. Now to do this, I need to draw a line from this symbol right here, which is my center symbol, and this one right here, I need to add that one in. And I'm going to match it up to this one here. So here's my matching line. So I'm starting to get one that looks like this. I just need to curve this off a little bit. So I don't want too many jagged edges. So I'm going to curve it like this. Ah, that looks better. And there has to be more of a curve because our dart is much bigger. And then this one here is going to be quite a bit more of a curve. There we go. So that looks very close. So we're going to add a grain line. Grain line and a grain line, which is almost always going to be parallel to center front. And grain line. So I'm almost ready to go now. All I need to do is go over to my photocopier and make myself a copy of this corner right here. So here's my photocopy, and now all I need to do is add seam allowances to these two pieces. And this one is now ready to go. Now we'll notice on this pattern piece that there's a notch right here, a couple notches. Let's see if we can't duplicate those. So let's put a notch right there and a notch right there, which means that I need to put notches on this other piece, and I forgot to do that before we photocopied. Oh no, I didn't. There it is. There it is. Okay, so this now becomes a notch, and then I can sew these two pieces back together again really nicely. And then I'm going to add a seam allowance for this side. So this one's now ready to trim and cut off. And trim this, of course. And I'm ready to start making my pleats. Next section, so you could see it a little better, I put this whiteboard underneath. You need to pull out your right and the left inset for B. We're going to trace off just the pleats and the front and this top area. Okay, so, oh, and don't forget your symbol up there. We'll have to replace those symbols down there. And your center front line, all of that's going to change. And then we're going to pleat these up. So there's what you've got. This pleats to this pleats to this, and oops, I forgot the middle one. Right here. We're going to completely redraw all these lines, so all of these exterior outside lines don't matter. All right, so there we go. That's what we need right now from this pattern piece. So now we're going to pleat this up. All pleated in place, and now we have to match it to the pattern piece that it's going to go over the top of. So match it to here. There's our line. Pin this in place. Trace it off. So keep going all the way around your pattern piece. Also include your dart. So this one has already been marked and traced off. I've got my dart here. I've also marked my center front line. What I need to do now is move this dart to this direction. I'm going to choose an angle that I think is going to look pretty good. So just slightly to the right of your center front symbol, draw a cut line right there. And we're going to cut into it just like this. This is called rotating a dart. And then we cut into the dart here. And then this goes up here to close the dart. Remember, see, I've left a hinge right there at the bust point. Closing that. So add in some paper right here. Tape it into place. And then this becomes a pleat. So this becomes like a dashed line. Dash, 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 dash. And this one becomes like a solid line. And this, it goes that direction. Now we're going to close up this dart space. It's going to curve in on me because it's so big. We're going to meet it right there. Let that fold down a little bit. Use some pins to hold those in place. And then this does the bust fitting for your right side. We're going to trim this up. On this point here. Be sure to cut through all of your layers and layers and layers of paper very carefully. Take out your pins. And voila, there's your cut line. Now for the rest of these little jogs that we need, just go ahead and close these up. And cut across them. All at once. And then you'll end up with a series of little jogs, just like you see on this one, how it jogs in and out. Trim that up, and this pattern piece is ready to go. You've got your grain line here. All you need to do now is